At 1417, roughly 45 miles north of Venezuela's coastline, two heavily equipped Venezuelan Su-30MK, two flanker fighter jets raced low over the Caribbean under the call sign Viper 1. Their instructions from Caracas were clear. Approach the USS Gerald R. Ford, challenge the presence of the U.S. Navy's flagship, and send a message about control of the surrounding airspace. Flying barely 500 feet above the water, the jets looked bold, aggressive, and fully committed. What their pilots may not have realized was that the moment they crossed the 30-mile boundary, they had entered a defensive envelope that had already been mapped, measured, and monitored by one of the most advanced vessels ever built. As the lead pilot, Colonel Ramirez, pushed the throttle forward for one final low pass, he was seconds away from discovering why testing a U.S. carrier strike group is never a wise move. There was no margin for miscalculation. The clock was already running. 75 seconds remained before the Aegis system delivered its final warning. This was not a random show of force. It was the breaking point of a long-building Caribbean standoff, one that echoed the tension of 1962 and the kind of confrontation older veterans would recognize immediately. The arrival of the USS Gerald R. Ford and its strike group marked a major shift in the region. Alongside the carrier were the USS Normandy, a guided systems cruiser, and two Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the USS Thomas Hudner and the USS Truxtun. Together, they formed one of the most advanced naval formations operating anywhere in the world. This deployment, known as Joint Task Force Southern Spear, was officially described as an operation aimed at disrupting cross-border smuggling and transnational networks linked to Venezuela's Cartel de los Soles. But from the Pentagon to the sailors aboard the Ford, the deeper purpose was clear. Sustained pressure on the government of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The stakes reached far beyond smuggling routes. At issue were the security of a vital global passageway, the Panama Canal, the stability of energy flows across the Western Hemisphere, and a direct test of American influence in a region Washington has long considered strategically essential. The United States had already demonstrated its reach through a series of precise operations against smuggling infrastructure, disrupting more than 20 sites and affecting at least 80 individuals tied to the regime's shadow networks. This was not a symbolic campaign. It was deliberate, organized, and designed to weaken the financial and operational foundations that kept Maduro's system moving. Maduro's response was predictable. He ordered a broad but largely symbolic mobilization of Venezuela's aging military, hoping to project strength at home and abroad. His real objective was simple: create a highly visible confrontation in international waters, turn it into political theater, and portray the United States as reckless and out of control. That calculation brought two Soviet-designed Sukhoi jets racing toward a $13 billion nuclear-powered American carrier, setting the stage for a moment where one wrong move could change the entire balance of power in the Caribbean. For the commanders inside the Ford's command and control network, the question was not how to escalate the situation, but how to deliver the clearest possible message without crossing a dangerous line. This was exactly the kind of moment the Carrier Strike Group had been built for. A tense, high-pressure encounter where decades of technology, training, and doctrine had to speak louder than any political statement. On the other side of this aerial standoff was Venezuela's Fighter Group 11, operating Russian-made Su-30MK-2 multi-role jets. On paper, they looked powerful. In reality, the fleet was struggling. Years of exposure to salty sea air, limited maintenance, and severe shortages of replacement parts had turned what should have been a serious Air Force asset into something far less reliable than it appeared. The motivation behind the flight was political as much as military. Caracas wanted to challenge what it described as American pressure near its claimed sphere of influence. The plan was simple and familiar, almost lifted from an old Cold War manual. Fly low, fly fast, look intimidating, create confusion on radar, and try to force U.S. commanders into backing away. But the pilots made one critical mistake. They were using large, complex jets designed mainly for long-range air operations and pushing them into a high-speed coastal approach against a defense network built specifically to handle pressure from multiple directions at once. The Su-30MK-2 is a massive aircraft, and that size made it anything but subtle. To a modern system like the SPY-6 radar, it was not a ghost in the sky. It was a clear, steady, highly visible track. The Venezuelan pilots were counting on speed and presence. What they did not understand was that the Ford's Combat Information Center was not judging the situation by how dramatic the approach looked. It was measuring the actual level of risk based on their older N001V radar, their flight profile, and the predictability of their route. Long before the pilots believed they had become a serious concern, the Ford Strike Group had already built a precise tracking solution. The carrier group could see them, classify them, and follow every movement with far greater clarity than the Venezuelan side could imagine. The real advantage Venezuela brought to the encounter was not advanced technology. It was political willingness to take an enormous gamble. But the American response had not been improvised. It had been studied, rehearsed, refined, and repeated over more than 70 years of operating in contested maritime regions around the world. Now that response was about to unfold with quiet discipline. No shouting, no panic, no dramatic gestures, just a controlled sequence of decisions designed to remove uncertainty and leave no room for political theater. The pilots, whose training relied heavily on simulators and limited real flight hours, were suddenly facing the kind of real-world test no simulator could fully prepare them for. At the center of the Ford Strike Group's protective network were its 4 escort ships, led by the USS Thomas Hudner. Hudner carried the advanced spy, 6V, 1-air, and defense radar, part of a new generation of systems far beyond the older Spy 1 architecture. Spy 6 is an active electronically scanned array, essentially a digital wall of awareness capable of tracking extremely small objects at vast distances with far greater sensitivity than previous systems. The moment the 2 Venezuelan Su-30s activated their older radars and began moving toward the carrier group's outer perimeter, Spy 6 began building a clean, detailed track. That information did not stay on one ship. Through Cooperative Engagement Capability, or CEC, the data was instantly shared across the entire formation. That meant the Ford, the Normandy, and the other escort ships all saw the same picture at the same time. A sharp, unified, crystal-clear view of the 2 incoming aircraft, their speed, their altitude, and their projected path. Inside the Ford's Combat Information Center, the atmosphere tightened. Every sailor at every console knew exactly what was happening. No one needed to guess. The system had already turned a tense political gamble into a measured technical problem, and the carrier group was ready to answer it with precision. The tactical action officer had already prepared the carrier group's response in 4 separate defensive layers, each one designed to control the situation without pushing it beyond the point of no return. The first layer was already in the sky. 2 F/A-18E/F Super Hornets flying combat air patrol high above and ahead of the formation. To the Venezuelan pilots, they were practically unseen. Their older radar warning systems were never built to detect and interpret this kind of modern aerial presence with accuracy. The second and third layers came from the escort ships surrounding the Ford. Their defensive systems included long-range Standard Missile 2 interceptors and the shorter-range RIM-162 Evolved Sea Sparrow system, better known as ESSM. For this kind of encounter, ESSM was the preferred option. Fast, precise, and designed to stop high-speed objects approaching at very low altitude. The destroyers had formed a tight protective ring around the carrier, giving the group maximum coverage in every direction. Their vertical launch systems were ready, each cell prepared to respond instantly if the aircraft continued to push closer. The final layer was the close-in defense system, a 20mm Gatling-style cannon capable of firing thousands of rounds per minute. It was the last resort, and Commander Hall had no desire to let the encounter reach that stage. Using data from every connected sensor in the strike group, the system calculated the best point to intervene, the exact moment the approaching jets would cross into the most sensitive boundary around the formation. The goal was not to create a disaster. The goal was to send a message so clear that no further action would be needed. Inside the Hudner's Combat Information Center, the tension reached its highest point when Major Ramirez ignored 3 separate radio warnings from the lead escort ship. The messages had been transmitted in both Spanish and English. Each one was calm, direct, and unmistakable, but the Venezuelan jets stayed silent. That deliberate silence, combined with their continued approach, left the commanders with fewer options. 60 seconds later, the aircraft crossed the 25-mile line, turning a dangerous display into a serious challenge under the strike group's rules of engagement. The moment they entered that zone, Commander Hall gave the order, execute Alpha. Instantly, 2 F/A-18E Super Hornets at 25,000 feet broke radio silence. Their powerful APG-79 AESA radars locked onto the approaching aircraft, sending an unmistakable signal into the cockpit of the lead Su-30. Inside Major Ramirez's jet, the warning system erupted. A sharp electronic tone filled the cockpit, telling him he was now being tracked by a far more advanced fire control system. Ramirez reacted immediately. Shocked by the sudden alert, he rolled the heavy Sukhoi hard to the left, trying to break the track with a risky low-altitude maneuver over the water. The move was sudden, aggressive, and unstable. To the American operators watching the screen, it looked less like confidence and more like panic. That was the turning point. 40 seconds later, the USS Thomas Hudner's systems determined that the situation had reached the threshold for a controlled response. Commander Hall authorized the next step, choosing the lowest level of action that could still make the message impossible to ignore. The Forward Launch System released a single RIM-162 ESSM interceptor. The 12-foot projectile surged forward and accelerated rapidly, moving far faster than the aging flanker could hope to match. It was not intended to bring the aircraft down. It was a calculated demonstration of reach, timing, and total control. 15 seconds later, the Super Hornets above released programmed decoys and flares, creating one final layer of confusion for the Sukhoi's older onboard systems. The lead Venezuelan pilot saw the interceptor racing toward his wingman's path, but the system had been programmed with extreme precision. It was set to activate 250 feet in front of the aircraft's nose, close enough to shake every sensor and every nerve in the cockpit, but far enough to avoid catastrophic damage. For the pilots, the message was impossible to misunderstand. The carrier group had seen them before they knew they were being watched. It had tracked them before they believed they were close. And now, without taking the situation beyond control, it had shown them exactly how little room they had left. The shockwave hit the Sukhoi like a wall of pressure, shaking the entire airframe, rattling the cockpit, and overwhelming the pilot's senses in an instant. For a brief moment, the second engine faltered, and a warning flashed across the digital display. Flame out! The message was impossible to miss. The U.S. Navy had shown that it could have taken full control of the situation at any moment, with systems the Venezuelan pilots never even saw coming. Instead, they were given a harsh but carefully measured warning, one that proved the carrier group was in complete command. The immediate result of Execute Alpha was a wide, uncontrolled turn by both Venezuelan jets. What began as a dramatic show of confidence quickly became a rushed withdrawal. The two Su-30s broke off their approach and turned southwest at maximum speed. Their political mission had collapsed. They had arrived to project strength and defiance. They left shaken, disorganized, and fully aware that they had flown into a level of control they were not prepared to challenge. The United States had ended the confrontation without anyone being harmed, while still following strict rules of engagement and delivering a message that could not be misunderstood. The cost for the Venezuelan Air Force was significant. The second aircraft now faced a major engine inspection. Several sensitive onboard systems would likely need replacement, and the larger damage was psychological. Confidence inside the command structure had been badly shaken. For the sailors aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, the carrier simply maintained its course and speed. Within minutes, flight operations returned to normal, as if the encounter had been nothing more than a brief disruption in an otherwise routine day at sea. That calm was the real display of strength. The quiet confidence on the Ford's bridge just moments after a situation that could have drawn international attention showed the difference between performance and preparation. The crew did not need dramatic gestures. They trusted their training, their technology, and the systems around them. The deeper lesson from this Caribbean standoff reaches far beyond Venezuela. It is a lesson about modern power, uneven capabilities, and the high price of misreading a superior system. The message is simple. Do not bring outdated tactics into a contest shaped by advanced technology, discipline, and strategic coordination. President Maduro and his commanders wanted a political victory. What they received instead was a clear demonstration of integrated technical and psychological pressure. The USS Gerald R. Ford Strike Group is not merely a collection of ships and aircraft. It is a connected defense network supported by advanced data systems where the sensors of one vessel can instantly guide the response of another. This controlled and precise display sent a signal not only to Caracas, but to every regional power watching from afar. Whether in the South China Sea, the Black Sea, or any other contested region, the lesson is the same. Bold gestures and aging equipment are not enough to challenge a system built on speed, coordination, and overwhelming awareness. The world's sea lanes will remain open and international waters will remain protected, but they will be guarded by those who have mastered technology, discipline, and the calculated strength needed to keep dangerous situations from spinning out of control. In modern conflict, the speed of shared information can matter more than the speed of any aircraft or projectile. So what is the deeper meaning of this deployment? Is it simply about stopping smuggling networks? Or is it a larger test of American resolve in a region where tensions are once again reaching Cold War levels? Share your thoughts in the comments below.